Here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. We're excited to have our neighbor here, Angela Belt, to present on interior design. All yours, Angela.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I can't see anybody, but I know that you're here. I saw people signed up. So I'm excited to have everyone talk about the fundamentals of interior design. I live and breathe this. I have been in the industry now for almost 20 years. And so I'm pretty excited just to let you guys, I'm going to take you through basically this room that you see right here. It's a dining room of mine. It was actually featured in Better Homes and Gardens magazine. I am an interior designer based here in West Hartford, Connecticut. And so I wanted to kind of take you guys through just sort of a case study of how this space came to life, which I think can also help you if you're trying to think about starting a new space, something that you want to redesign in your home and your rentals, wherever you are, and you're going, God, I'd love to do this, but how do I go through this process and what is all of that that goes into it? I'm going to take you through this project, which took me probably about 6 months all in all, and kind of show you how this came to life. So again, a little bit about me. Been in the industry for 20 years. Some of my big highlights, I'm a contributing shopping editor for House Beautiful magazine. I have also been interior stylist for a book published by Random House called Remix. Gets all into how to really create a home with your soulful personal style. And I'm also a podcast host. I have this show called The Mood Board, where I talk to different tastemakers in the interior design industry about race, culture, and interior design. People who know me well know that I love anything and everything about interior design. I love talking about it, exploring trends, what's new, what isn't working anymore, what's out. I'm that weird person who's going to be walking down the street. I want to look in people's windows. I love doing home tours. So I'm pretty excited to get into this space and talk to you guys about it. And just so you guys know too, if anybody has any questions, there will be a Q&A at the end. So we'll be getting into the fundamentals of interior design. Like I said, we're going to be focusing on my dining banquette that was featured in Better Homes and Gardens magazine. So whenever I start a project, I think it's really important before you even get into I see a lot of times where people get really excited, and this is especially on social media where we see it, where someone's like, I don't have a plan, and you're pulling things apart and you're taking everything down. And that is typically when you waste a lot of time and a lot of money because you do not have a plan. And so most times when I start a project, I always begin, even with my team, my assistant will always start with the research phase. And that starts with, where are the pain points in the project? Where are things that you know are your priorities that are problems? So in our space, when I kind of got started on this, one of the biggest issues is that I really wanted a dining banquette. I wanted bench seating, but like many old homes in New England, there is a radiator in a very annoying spot that to move would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So I had to think about what could I do in the design process to work around that. Secondly, I had a light fixture. Like many people, you'll probably experience. I have ceilings that are under 8 feet, and I have a light fixture that is not even remotely centered to any piece of furniture for a dining table at all. It just doesn't make any sense. So I need to address that. The scale's off, the look is off, the positioning's off. That's not going to work. Um, then I have one of those fun corner cabinets that many older homes, especially in this area, have. And I wanted to figure out, one, did I take it out completely? Could I update it? Overall, it's just not something that I found that I aesthetically liked. Wanted to figure out what else I could do with it. And then lastly, probably the bigger issues for me were also just these curtains were something that I had moved with. Moving into a new property, the drapery didn't make any sense. You lost all of that character and charm of the architecture of the actual windows. And it just kind of looks like this weird ghostly thing going on. So those were kind of my priorities to say, this is what I want to make sure I fix in the design. So now, like I said, we start with the research. Not always fun, but absolutely necessary. So before I even begin to get into budget or, the exact materials or grabbing samples, I always start with like what's called an early vision board. It's not very deep. There's not a ton of things going on. But I like to go to places like Pinterest. I'll go on Instagram. I'll buy a couple of magazines. I'll rip out some pages. And I just want to get an overall feel of what am I thinking for this space. So, something that I've always wanted is a Saarinen style dining table. It has a tulip base, has an oval shape to it. I felt like that was something that I knew I wanted. So I made sure that I kind of looked at tables that kind of had that feel. I knew that I wanted an L-shaped banquette, so I started looking at different built-ins that people had put online to give me ideas. I knew that my corner cabinet needed some updating, and I'll even get into like, oh, this might seem kind of a small detail, but I knew that I wanted some cool plates. I wanted some silverware, and I definitely wanted a dining chair that had an interesting pattern to it. So this process shouldn't take you very long, but it should be a quick snapshot of what you're thinking about. Then I start getting into a little bit more detailed work once I've gone, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Let's start making a mood board, really getting into the ideas. The mood board, I actually have done lots of presentations on this. I even have a share class that talks about how to make a mood board through Photoshop. Um, this one is actually done through a pretty easy app called Morpholio Board, which I can always add at the end for you guys to use. It actually connects to your Pinterest board, and you can very easily drop things into a page, scale them to the size that you need, and give you a vision of what you're thinking in probably under 5 to 10 minutes. Um, what's really important for me when I build a mood board is not that every single thing that's going to go in the room is there, but the big pieces are there. So I know, okay, I really wanted to go with chair with patterns. I know that I definitely want this tulip style dining table. I love this type of origami style lighting. I want wallpaper. I'm interested in a rust colored fabric. I want a cowhide rug because I've been dying for one. So I start looking for things like that. Always when I start to work on a project, I always think about too, if this is my mood board, what's the color palette that goes with that? So that when I start looking for items, I don't start pulling in something that's yellow, or I wouldn't automatically pull in like a different color orange that maybe just doesn't make any sense. Once I start defining what my color palette is, I can sort of tighten my shopping list as I start making decisions to say, am I still in the same place, or am I kind of veering left? I need to make sure I'm staying on track. And then I'm always going to talk about what are my finishes as well. So, these could be wood finish. You could be, in this case, it was metal. I was making sure I wanted to pull some gold in. Um, but you want to make sure too, like, what are going to be some of those accent pieces? Is your hardware going to be nickel, natural steel, stainless steel? And you want to make sure that that's consistent again. So when you start to pull those actual pieces, you won't get lost on something that you love and then realize later it's not the right finish. Then what happens is I start working in 3D design. So I had an intern actually do this for me. Um, I'm a firm believer in before you start any type of project that's going to require construction, to really plan it out in the 3D space. And it saves you so much money and time, especially when you're building things that are custom, that once you start making changes, there are a lot of fees involved in that process. So for me, this is really a time to experiment with like, okay, do I want to do beadboard or no beadboard? Do I want to do wallpaper that looks like this style with circles, or do I want something a little bit more subtle? Do I want to go with sort of this orange cushion, or do I want more of a blue pattern? Um, this is the time where you want to experiment with all of those ideas and do as many mock-ups as you can. Um, in the 3D space, because again, this is much more affordable to make minor updates and changes versus starting everything over from scratch. So I'm going to show you guys just another process. This is what I did for the banquette, but I want to show you really what a lot of designers are doing now and what I also am currently doing with clients. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is that the SketchUp is one version of it, and a lot of people still use it, but there is definitely a strong demand for photorealism. You guys have probably seen these AI version, beautiful interior design spaces, and this is a lot of times what people now want to see when they see a spot. Um, so I kind of wanted to take you through kind of a more updated version of how that works now. So typically it'll start with a sketch. I started my training, everything had to be done by hand. It was a little funny, this company that I worked with to do this photorealism, the guy was like, "Oh my God, you used a pencil?" And I'm like, "I still use pencil because that's how I started." Um, but just laying out a general floor plan is really a good rule of thumb of what is a space going to be. Then taking it into a computer program. This is a really simple one that I use sometimes if I'm not just rushing. It's called floorplanner.com. I think there's like a very minimal low service, but again, you can do this in SketchUp, CAD, Revit. There are way more advanced ways to do this. But just giving yourself a floor plan so you can clearly lay out spacing, flow. You always want to make sure that your furniture pieces aren't on top of each other. This is for a kitchen, is there at least 3 feet of space to navigate around without chairs bumping into refrigerators, oven doors opening? It's very important to have that. And then really creating a mood board. I love when I have the opportunity with clients where it's not just the 2D version, but we can actually have enough time together where I can actually pull physical samples together with photos. And then I want to show you guys on the next slide. This is what I sent to a company that I worked with out of Mexico to give you this. This is really where people are going more within the research and planning process of how they want to see a design. So all of those things were sent to them and we talked through it. And then I was able to create a concept that's photorealistic. I'm actually installing this kitchen right now, and everything that's in these photos is almost identical to how it looks in real life. So I just wanted to show you this is probably more the direction people are going, but 2 years ago when I was working on my banquette, it was more in SketchUp. And then last but not least of the research phase, the part that lots of people like to ignore, or they just aren't always realistic about it, and people get on interior designers about this a lot, is creating the line item budget. So before I start any type of install, we need to have a line item budget where we know, what are our services going to cost? What is the interior design fee going to be? What are all of the additional things? So this is just an example of something that I worked on. Um, but I think this is really important that if somebody loves, let's say like that rendering we just showed, you loved everything in it, I would then create a line item budget of all of those things. This is also a great time when you start bringing in vendors, you start bringing in quotes, you can show people visuals and say, this is exactly what I want to make. How do I make that a reality? And then I always like to include, you should put in 15% padding, and that is for anything that happens that's unexpected. Let's say, and I'll get into this more, but like one of the things that happened when I was doing this dining banquet, I ordered a dining table that was 5 feet. I thought that would be the right size. I lived with it for about a month. The size didn't work. So I needed to reorder it in a larger size and pay for the difference. So I needed to make sure I had some wiggle room in my budget to pay for a much larger size table than I had originally planned for. All right, now we're going to get into the process. So I'm going to just take you through different steps throughout the room that kind of made it all come together. And as I said, there is always a lot of trial and error. I think with interior design, it's really important. I say this to my clients a lot, is just being gentle with yourself. It is very normal to plan out everything perfectly, and there are still mistakes. And just knowing that's part of the process. So the first thing that I wanted to start with was really doing this. custom radiator banquette. I will let you know, especially in New England, I reached out to several carpenters who were like, it just can't be done. You can't build a banquette around a radiator. That's a crazy idea. I won't be a part of this. And so I was really lucky to work with someone who actually was like, my dad and I actually had a radiator company growing up. And so I've made a ton of radiator covers. And I think this would be a really fun challenge for me. So, I sketched out ideas, he sketched out ideas, and we came up with a way to build a bench seating around the radiator. I don't have a great photo, but there's actually an additional cover that goes over this area as well that's sticking out. And then all of this is that radiator metal material. It's actually warm to the touch. It's never hot. And then we also decided to add into design because I have two kids. And you guys know how kids are. They love to play and do activities at the dining table. We actually built in some storage drawers on both ends of this banquette as well. So when dinner time's over and people want to be creative, you can take art supplies out. But when it's dinner time, everything can be put away. But it was a pretty elaborate process that we needed to work around, that not only aesthetically it looked good, but that for safety concerns, this actually made sense. So this took probably the carpenter and I, 2, 3 passes going back, making sure that things were okay, that the wood wouldn't split from the expansion of the heat and all of those things back and forth, to make this process a reality. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. There we go. So then the other part of this that got pretty complicated was the custom cushions. So I worked with another company in South Carolina to say, look, I need cushions. Not only I need a cushion that can go above the radiator right here. So we needed a cushion that I could Velcro and apply to the wall above here, but wouldn't touch. And then we also needed cushions that could work around all of the bench seating. So we needed it in about 5 or 6 different cuts to work around the window frames as well. So with this process, on top of needing the cushions to look good, they also needed to be extremely durable. I have a 2-year-old, I have an 11-year-old. I wanted something that looked really nice, that felt like we were at a hotel or a fancy restaurant, but in all honesty, it needed to be a performance fabric that was extremely durable. So this is actually a performance velvet. And so what's great about it is that I will be honest, my son has drawn crayon on it. He has spilled milk on it. My daughter has spilled makeup on it. All of these things we're able to wipe up pretty easily. And so a lot of times whenever I'm looking at fabric, I'm ordering a ton of samples. I must have gone through 30 samples, testing, spilling ketchup on them, kind of getting them pretty dirty and messy and seeing how easy it was to manage before purchasing. So that's one of those things that I think is really important in the trial and error. There are some fabrics that you'll fall in love with that they feel great, but are they really livable? So that's always something that I love to do, that when I'm buying fabrics, I like to test them out as much as I can. I might even order, if it's a color that I like, 2 or 3 samples. So I have one that's a clean one, and then another 2 that I can kind of mess up before I actually do the order. So another part of this design that I kept getting stuck on was the corner cabinet. I will not lie, doing the custom banquette with the cushions and that custom radiator seating ended up eating up a large part of my budget. So there was a part of me at one point that was like, oh, I'm just going to totally rebuild the corner cabinet. And it financially wasn't viable anymore in the budget. So I started to think about what were some things that I could do that I could update this piece, make it feel like something different without a lot of money. One of the things that was interesting was that there was always these kind of patterns in the back of in the back of the hutch. And I don't know why, but I always hated it. Um, but I never repainted over it. I thought about wallpapering it. What was I going to do? It just doesn't make any sense. And instead, I decided, you know what? Why don't I keep that pattern in there? It's actually a really nice part of something that was original to the house. Why don't I instead take the outside cabinet and just paint it black? I was using chalkboard paint for something else in my house. I had leftover, and I actually put it on this cabinet instead. Um, and for me, what I liked is that just making that change to the black created a much more dramatic, sophisticated look. And then I decided, okay, the hardware isn't something that I want. I said I wanted to go with a gold finish. And so I just got these like half round um hardware pieces actually from Amazon for probably like $10 and then just updated all of the hardware, and it just made a huge difference on how this cabinet looked. And this was completely a low budget part of the process, and so I think whenever I'm working with clients, I usually like to talk about, again, what are our priority pieces and where are those things that we know that we want to change? But if we can't make a dramatic change, what can we do that could be a good DIY or something that's a way more affordable change so you can get that big thing that you know that you wanted, but me ripping out that corner cabinet and totally redesigning it, it just wasn't going to work in the budget at the time. So the other thing that I often get asked all the time in this space is, what is that paint color? And I'm like, it's not paint, it's actually wallpaper. And again, I went through probably 10 different samples that I taped up to try to think about what did I want in this space. My first floor is completely open concept. And so there are no walls between my kitchen, my living room, and this dining area. So one thing that I was really concerned about was putting a wallpaper up. I love wallpaper and I love bold patterns, but what would a bold pattern look like in an open concept space? Is like it going to be screaming at you when you're on the other side of the room or you're watching TV or you're cooking? Is it going to become distracting to the eye? So I wanted to look for a pattern that if you're far away from it, sort of blends into the background. It doesn't really do much. But when you're up close, you can actually see these kind of hand-drawn lines. And it's just a very calming, kind of soothing wallpaper. It doesn't take too much attention away from the rest of the space, which was really important in the design. What's also nice about this is that it is also a peel and stick wallpaper, and it is also really durable. So my son has drawn crayon on it, pencil on it, and I'm just able to take a magic eraser and it wipes right off. So those are always things, again, when I'm looking at products, getting samples, I'm always wanting to test drive it too. I want to know how am I going to be able to live with it. So that's always been a nice feature with this, is that this one's also been pretty easy for us to clean. Another case study that I wanted to get into was window treatment. I feel like window treatments, and especially in interior design, this comes up in almost every single project, comes up especially in New England homes, people trying to find ways to save on energy costs, trying to find ways to get privacy, and also a way to bring in light. Um, so this is like kind of the sad, ghost like where we started. And I was thinking, what can I do to really, one, I wanted to show off the architectural details of the window frame of our windows. I really love that character. And I didn't want to lose that. I also was really specific on the fact that I didn't want window treatment that people could see into my house. I wanted something that could filter light in, but you couldn't look in. So I wanted to make sure that there was privacy. So I ended up working with a company called the Shade Store. They actually have a store in Westport. And I ended up getting a couple of samples. I really encourage whenever anyone is looking for window treatments to tape them up to the window and then look at them throughout the day. You want to look at the morning, afternoon, and evening light so you can see the difference of how does the light filter through. There's a lot of things that are talked about in window treatments, especially if you're doing Roman or roller shades. There's something like 10%, 5%, 3%. Those percentages often deal with the amount of privacy or the amount of light that can come through. Um, so you always want to test those in real life to say if something is saying it has a 10%, which meaning like 90% of the sun won't come through, you still want to test that in your space to see if that's really going to work for you and how the sun works throughout the day. Um, for me, I was like, I fell in love with this because it was a simple white. I always love a valance. And it was something that, again, light could come in, but there was still enough privacy from the outside. So then the other thing that I always like to think about, this comes up a lot. I'm sure many of you guys deal with this too, is how to deal with lighting in your spaces. My home is 80 years old. The ceilings are under 8 feet. And so it's always trying to find that balance between lighting that's interesting, but still works with your home. Um, so this was again one of those challenges. As I said, the original light fixture was too small, not centered, didn't make any sense. So one of the things that I had to do was work with an electrician to relocate it. And then I also really wanted to do something that was still tall, dramatic. The light fixture over the dining table is almost 3 feet wide. It is not something that most people would choose. And that's something that I think, again, is why you want to work with a designer. You want to get something out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times people would go, oh, it's too big. But when people come to my house, they're like, oh my God, I love how dramatic that feels. And so I always say, typically with lighting, you should always probably go for the larger size. 9 times out of 10, when I'm usually working with someone, they've always ordered something that looks tiny in the room, and it's not really giving it enough space to fill it out. And especially when you're entertaining and you think about when you go to a restaurant and you want that feel, the lighting usually feels large and dramatic. Now, this is not large enough that, when we're sitting, we lift an arm, we never hit it. It's close enough to the ceiling. So those are things to always think about in the design. I think there's a balance between what's dramatic and what's just oversized. But I do encourage that. And as well, I always think in every space there should be at least two. I mean, I'd love to really have three lighting sources in this space, but again, it's open concept. It wouldn't work. So I always make sure there's at least a table lamp. So, if this overhead light might be too much or it's just not needed, just having a soft secondary lighting, like a table lamp with a shade, is always a nice addition to have into a space. And then lastly, this is probably the most exciting part. I don't have a ton of slides. I realized I was trying to find photos, but going through finishing touches. So these are kind of, I always consider this like the jewelry, the things that go into the room that really give it that personality. So for me, when I think about finishing touches, I try to think about what is the large piece that has the most colors that I want to pull from. And so for me, that came back to my dining chairs. So I try to start with that piece and say, how do I pull from this to get everything else out? So I have at least 5 colors to play with there. So from there, I'm going, okay, I'm going to want to pull some placemats that might have this blue. There's a little bit of almost like a purplish pink. So I'm going to look for plates that kind of have that color. I'm going to want a glass that has a little bit of that light blue mixed in. I think I like that kind of rattan material. I want to play that into this. Um, and then I'm always thinking about scale as well. So if this chair has all of this pattern, I want to make sure the other pieces that I'm picking with have similar colors, but the patterns aren't as tight. So I try to look for pieces that maybe something was a little bit more, it's a little bit more bold. Maybe it's a few more things. Maybe there's a little bit of fringe. Oh, sorry, I think we went back. Having a little bit of fringe, but again, not being too much more than the chair. So I think it's always important when you're looking at your patterns, how do you kind of contrast the scale so things don't start to feel really busy. I think that's always an important part when you start laying it out. Because I always tell people too, I mean, I can get lost in home goods too, and you can be a sucker and you can buy like a ton of things, but if it's a ton of things that almost kind of look like the same thing or the scale's the same, it just ends up getting lost in the mix. So it's important to sort of lay some of those things out before you start purchasing and bringing all those things in. All right. So now we get to the big reveal. Like I said, it only took 6 months, give or take a little bit of time. And when I work on projects like this with clients, it is always, people are always surprised how long it takes. But what's always nice is going through those steps together, the implementation process. It's usually pretty smooth because there was so much planning that went into it in the beginning. So, like I said, this dining space, I was always like super proud and excited of it. It got featured in a double feature for Better Homes and Gardens magazine. It was in their May and June issue of 2022. And for me, it was just an awesome experience because I had worked so hard on it. And it was just great to get the response of, I think, how people liked it. And I think dining banquettes, especially, right now, are just something that a lot of people want to do and they want to try out. And so I thought this would just be a good story to share. And on that note, I can open it up for Q&A.